All right, good morning, everybody. So lately, I've been having ear training on my mind. And so, if you're wondering what ear training is, it is the ability to hear music and kind of understand what's going on. So, an analogy might be if you're to see a green car, you can immediately recognize, oh, that's a green car. Because you're able to take what your eye is seeing here on one side and your brain connects that to a concept, the concept green in your head, and you're able to identify it, you're able to call it out, and if you needed to reproduce that color, you could, right? You could go home, and if you had the paint, whatever, you could match that more or less, right? It's a deep green, a light green, whatever. To a certain extent, you could determine, you could reproduce that, right? So in music, there's two ways to kind of translate that idea. One is perfect pitch. Very few people have perfect pitch, and apparently, if you don't get it when you're a child through association, then your time to learn it is gone. But there's another type of association called relative pitch, and so that's been something that I've been kind of developing, but that's not, that's an idea, right, of ear training, but it's not the only idea of ear training. And I'll share with you an example. So when we were like newlyweds, we were leading at a chapel in Germany, and we were learning a new song, and actually we got into a lot of discussion with the team members about what the tempo was of the song. And this is, back before we had the click. So we're talking about how this song goes, and it felt like the song sped up during the bridge or the chorus or whatever it was, and the discussion was, well, we should be speeding up here or we should be slowing down there, and at that time I did not really have the musical vocabulary or the ear training to recognize, no, that's not speeding up. What's actually happening is we're going into a cut time feel. So that's another example that doesn't have to do with pitch, but an example of being, of hearing something and then being to associate that with a musical concept, a musical idea, like the color green, or it's, mental framework for what's going on. So if I had that idea of cut time, if I'd known the way that would work out, I guess, or when I heard that, if I could recognize that, then I would have been able to explain that better to the team. But I didn't, right? So we muddled through or whatever, and we got it. But anyway, so I mean that's not, that's just two examples, right? One is interval training, and another one is rhythm training. There's a lot of different examples out there that I don't want to go into in this video. But what I do want to talk about is just kind of the power of ear training, like why it matters. So there's a guy, Jacob Collier. You can look him up on YouTube, and he's a phenomenal musician. The guy is, he's got chops on multi-instrumentalist. Some people compare him to Bach. They say he's the modern Bach because he's got this compositional talent. Like he composes and sings and does stuff. And in fact, he's in his early 20s and released his debut album, recorded in his room, like in his bedroom. I think it's called In My Room or something like that. And won 3 Grammys. So just a phenomenal guy. But anyway, we're talking to him about how he developed his playing. And he said, a lot of people think of me as a chops musician, but that's not really how I came at it. He's like, in fact, I've only started to learn a lot of these instruments relatively recently. Well, obviously, talent comes into how quickly you learn that. But what he said was he had approached it from a compositional perspective, like hearing the ideas, understanding the ideas, thinking about the idea that he had in his head, and then trying to translate that into something on paper. Or translate that into the concept into something that he could perform. And so when I think about music, you hear music or you hear a song that you're trying to perform, Really, there's kind of two steps of taking that from the air, and then it has to go through your head, and that's the understanding piece of it, where you're training your ear to understand what's going on, and then there's the skill half of it as well. So being able to get that out of your fingertips or your voice or whatever it is, both of those things have to work together. But really, if you start off and you don't understand what's going on, then you're not going to be able to take the idea from the air. You can take it from a sheet of music if you've got technical skill to read and to play. You can do it that way. But again, like let's say you're reading music, and our kids, they're learning how to read music, but but then when I throw a chord sheet or I give them something else, they're playing very basically, and I'm like, hey, why, you have all the skills, why aren't you applying them to this chord sheet? And, the issue was they didn't understand the skills that they had. Like they didn't understand when they're playing this arpeggio, that's a G to an E minor or something like that. They couldn't hear it. They couldn't tell like what was going on. And so, it's something we've been working on with my kids. Anyway, I digress a little bit. But the concept is the same when you hear something. Either you hear it on the radio or you hear it at practice or at church or whatever. You're like, man, that's really, that's inspiring. I want to be able to do that. The first step is to understand it. Likewise, let's say you're getting ready to compose, right? You have an idea in your head. To be able to play, you can if you can hear it and you can understand it, then you can play it. Or another example, like I would sit around sometimes for hours just playing on the guitar, and come up with some cool chord progression and be like, man, that's so cool, but have no clue like what I was doing. Like in the sense of I'm playing some fingerings, I didn't know what the fingerings were, I didn't know what the chord was, so basically it just evaporates into the air, unless I recorded it, on a just a recorder or whatever. The idea, I can't write it down, like I can't convey it. So I say all this to, I guess, kind of encourage you. Like I'm going to be doing a couple of videos on ear training and different ways that you can set your ear up, because I think like the style of music that we do is very conducive to that ear vocabulary. It's not very complicated, and I think if you listen a little bit and you have a few ideas in your head, like few theory ideas in your head, you can very quickly decode what's going on. So anyhow, that's my my diatribe about ear training. I hope it's maybe at least introduced an idea to you that maybe you haven't been thinking about. But I would definitely encourage you to maybe think about on your instrument or what it is that you do. If you're a sound guy, think about what it is, that you hear and how maybe you can translate that into a concept. So you can communicate it, either, musically communicate, as in playing, or verbally communicate to somebody else, like that's cut time, or that's a 1-4-5 progression, or whatever it is that you're hearing, because I think that improves us all as musicians. All right, so that is it. Hope y'all are having a great day, and I'll talk to you later.